Hey, everybody. Welcome to Alumless. Thank you so much for listening. Today is Friday, March 29th, and this is the Organizational Effectiveness in Advancement edition. I am Ryan Catherwood, and I'm joined by Chris Marshall. On the show, we talk about engagement strategies in advancement. Of course, Alumless is a CMAC production. We're pre-recorded today, but we will be checking the comments section in the LinkedIn event. So please chime in with a question or comment. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast edition of Alumless to hear our 30-minute bonus segment with today's special guest, Sue Ballard from RPI, and all of our guests each week. We're grateful to have Max and the team at Protopia as our sponsoring partners. Protopia has created a transformational AI-powered technology that matches questions from students or recent graduates with alumni all over the world that are perfectly positioned to answer them. Without requiring alumni to be mentors or participate in a program spread out over months or sign up for any kind of app or platform, Protopia makes scaling introductions simple. Questions get submitted and Protopia's AI does all the work. Protopia can even target stakeholders like young alumni or lapsed donors and provide them with a meaningful volunteer experience. And who isn't trying to scale volunteerism? Visit protopia.co/alumless for more details and to check out the technology that schools like Duke, Denison, Florida State, and the London School of Economics are using to make scaling their alumni networks available to everyone. All right. Well, Chris, it's good to see you. How's it going?
All good here. Good to see you.
Living the dream there in Bethlehem.
LTD is what I always say to my son. He says, "How's it going?" LTD, living the dream. On 9 Zooms today. He shakes his head.
Nine Zooms today?
You're right, exactly.
Yeah, I've noticed your schedule has been hard to break through these couple of days. And you had a nice vacation last week with the family in Disney, which was awesome.
It was not restful, but it was awesome.
Not rest. No, that's definitely true. Disney is without a doubt the least restful vacation known to humanity. But it is definitely a fun time. Did you have a favorite ride that you went on?
I didn't get to go on it because I had 2 days I was at a client, but the kids went on Tron, which they tell me was this most spectacular thing ever. My favorite one is there's a ride in it's the one where you're on the Banshee flying in Pandora. I think it's called the Flight of the Banshee or something like that. Yeah, and it's a virtual reality kind of thing where you're sitting in this and they make you feel like you're really flying on top of an animal. It's unbelievable. So that was my favorite.
That definitely was my favorite too. I was at Disney last year, spring break, and that one's at the Animal Kingdom. And,
yep.
Without doing the lightning lane thing, there was like a 3-hour wait for that particular one, which is just incredible. Like, how does that happen? But
there's nothing in the world I'd wait 3 hours for. So we were in the lightning lane, right?
I feel you on that one. Well, we're going to have a great conversation today with Sue Ballard, our special guest. But kicking off the conversation, I thought, wanted to ask you about your time leading alumni teams. And, we're going to talk with Sue about all sorts of issues when it comes to talent management, organizational effectiveness, employee engagement. So really sort of thinking through some of these issues. We haven't really tackled them on Alumless today, which is one of the things I'm most excited about to chat with Sue. But I wanted to ask you, is there anything looking back, kind of a talent management move that you would have done differently or something you were really proud of? Just kind of thinking back to some of the maneuvers that you made.
Yeah, proud of. I take full credit for recruiting Andrew Gosen to come to Cornell. That was a huge, I think Margaret at Princeton is still mad at me, 15 years later that I stole him from his alma mater and brought him up to Cornell. And he's been there for 12 years now or more. I think it's approaching 14 years, and he's thriving and doing great. And he's just a thought leader in our space. And so hiring Andrew is my most proud moment. If I would go back and do it differently, there's a fine line on this one. I would love to get Sue's take on it. I have seen a lot of people come in and make changes too fast. I think I was on the other side. I think I made them too slow. So I would make changes a little faster, but I wouldn't want to be the one who got them to the point where we were changing so fast that it was, scorched earth behind all those changes. So I think accelerating the process when especially having been a consultant for now, we diagnose problems pretty quickly and can see where the issues are. Sometimes they're programmatic, strategic, sometimes it's personnel. And I would move a little quicker on some personnel issues that we
Yeah.
didn't move on last time through this.
It's always interesting as a consultant when you're trying to diagnose some of the internal challenges that teams are facing. Is it a philosophical
Yeah.
problem? Is it a communications challenge? Is it an alignment problem? Like there's always interesting intricacies, I think, when it comes down to kind of thinking about what makes an organization operate most
Yeah.
effectively.
Yeah. 100%.
Do you have a kind of a fundamental philosophy about how to cultivate talent once they're on your team and you're thinking about the growth of that individual or team?
And let me start question right before that one is recruiting. I always, many of our listeners know that I was a collegiate 12 years and I was an okay coach, but I was a really good recruiter. Getting the right people to match the culture and align with what we want was part of the process of finding the talent to bring to literally the team when I was a coach. Now, in my roles now, I applied that exact same recruiting philosophy to bring people in who align with what we're trying to get done and look for people to understand what the assigned tasks are, what the implied tasks are, so we can hit the ground running. And once they're there, once we get them, to your question, my I always said to them, listen, I'm going to micromanage you like crazy for the first 1, 2, 3 months until we get aligned on things, and then I'm going to let you go and do your job. I'm never going to bother you again. Go ahead and run. And my goal, back to Andrew Ghostin, my goal was never say no to Andrew. If I could get that done, we would have a successful program. So, hands on at the beginning, get them in the right direction, and then ultimately let them run and do their thing. And my job is to get things out of the way, is to help clear the lane so that they can be successful and with the skills they bring to it. And that's my fundamental philosophy for running teams, leading teams.
Yeah. I always kind of felt the same way during periods of tradition. I kind of needed to micromanage a bit more, but ultimately you hope to provide kind of a scaffolding
Yep.
of
Yep.
concepts, ideas, philosophies, and let the folks you've hired be the experts to fill it in around programs and tactics. But let's
100%.
bring Sue Ballard out because she is the expert in all this. Sue, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Chris, for having me.
Great to see you. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah,
Sue,
absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Sue is the Associate Vice President for Employee Engagement and Advancement Operations at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, RPI. Prior to her role at RPI, Sue had a similar role at Syracuse University, but was also Vice President for Alumni Engagement. So she is fully dialed into all the things that we
Yeah.
talk about here on Alumless. Sue, maybe just to get us started, you might share a little bit with listeners about your role. Often we see Assistant Vice President of Talent Management, but now more and more we're seeing Employee Engagement or People Engagement Officer. What are your thoughts and reactions to that, and especially kind of given your title?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I love this question. I had this question last month at the Talent Management Case Conference that I had an opportunity to serve as faculty. And so, it's my belief that employee engagement is really moving in the direction of the foundation to everything we do, which includes talent management. Now, there are certainly a variety of opinions on this within the industry, people that are far more skilled than I am at this. But I've always focused on any team I've had the opportunity of leading, of really focusing on the employees first. And at the core, that's what employee engagement is all about, really to simplify it. And so with my role today at RPI, it's twofold in that I have an operational component. So I have communications, donor relations, prospect research, data integrity, business intelligence, all rolled into one. And then I have employee engagement, which RPI is going through a major invest to grow model. And so when Matt Termolin engaged me in a conversation to come and work with him again, and really ensure that we're focusing on the amazing talent that we're recruiting, that we retain them through an employee engagement model and the culture that we're building. So you see more and more employee engagement, chief people officer, and I think it really speaks to semantics matter in our work, and that focusing on the human being is the most important part of our role in order for that individual to feel supported and productive.
Well, as we were sort of thinking about the topics to tackle in the show, we were thinking a little bit more about key components for successful employee engagement. I know that's a big part of your role. Are there differences in how we should be thinking about organizational effectiveness within advancement versus other types of organizational units? Is there something that sort of differentiates the advancement organization?
I don't think that there are, and here's why. I follow a lot of the Gallup work, and a lot of people that are my peers in the industry follow Gallup. And there's really 5 to 6 main components of employee engagement, and it's about the purpose, the development of someone, the ongoing dialogue, the focusing on their strengths, which we do through Clifton Strengths at RPI, and having a caring manager. In fact, the research and the data shows 70% of someone's engagement comes directly through the relationship that that individual has with the manager. So that's really, really important. And that's not just specific to advancement. That's specific to the workplace culture in general, as Gallup studies that. And so I think it's more about embracing where we're headed within all industries in order to retain talent and be productive through a model of employee engagement, or whatever term you might want to use. Chief people officer, I find, is more common within the corporate side of the house. Talent management, employee engagement is far more higher ed specific. But you do see specifically larger advancement shops always kind of having someone in this role. And I think that speaks to the history of advancement, ensuring that we have the very best fundraisers specifically out there, being able to build a community that we need to build and do the philanthropic work that we have to do.
Are there aspects of the role that you find most challenging?
Yes. Matt loves when I answer this question. He does that.
We have a sidebar off script question about working with Matt, but we'll get to that later.
He's the best. It's this, and I spoke about this at a presentation a couple of months ago. It's that, and this is not just for me and my role, it's for all managers, because it's on all of us, 70%, right? I always go back to the fact, 70%. Yeah. What happens in our work is that the fire of the day or the hour, and that's not specific to RPI, right? Chris, you're shaking your head. Like, as a swim 100%. Coach, you had it 24/7, right? Yep. And I didn't swim for you, but I was a college swimmer, as you know, and so like I get it, right? So whether it's alumni engagement or stewardship team or anything else I've done in my career, we have the real world operational components that we have to get done that are timely, right? Yep. Yep. And what's the first thing to slip through our fingers and to push it off and to say, I'm going to get to that tomorrow. I'm going to do stay interviews next month. I'm going to have that crucial conversation next month, because it's sometimes falls to the bottom of the priority list. And I think that that's the most challenging aspect of this work, that while, in my opinion, it's not brain science in what we're doing, but it's often the first thing that we push to the bottom because of all the other competing priorities, especially when you have a role where there's multiple elements pushed into that role.
You just described what I would call the epidemic in our industry, frankly, across advancement, the day-to-day tactical work that gets in the way of the broader strategic work. I often will share that, sometimes having a consultant is the only time you're kind of forced to be strategic, that once a month when that person's in town or you're on a Zoom with them.
Yeah.
Where have you been able to create most impact in your first year at RPI?
So in my first year at RPI, great question. So I started May 1st of 2023, and from about June 15th of 2023 to 2 weeks ago, RPI has hired within our advancement team 27 people. Small number.
One every couple of weeks, basically, right?
Yeah. It's the running joke that like I've created this onboarding program for advancement, which is my answer. I think it's the most important part right now of what I'm focused on are the onboarding elements and what we're doing. And we're in our HR at RPI has a fantastic onboarding program, I have to say, and what they do and what they provide. And so I saw that and I was like, okay, well, let's make sure that advancement is partnering with them and what that looks like. So we've created a very similar half-day experience with all of the executive leadership team. We just launched this for the first time in January. And we had about 7 new colleagues. We kind of scooped up and rolled them in from October-ish. And, they were to spend 4 hours with every AVP and Matt, our VP, and to hear us talk about the vision and the strategy and where we're going and the culture. That's important. That's really, really important that leadership team sets that aside. And so that's just one element of onboarding that we've created. But I think for us right now, it's the onboarding elements. It was the number one focus, knowing how quickly we were going to hire and how quickly people were just going to join the ship, which is super exciting. And we're super grateful for the investment that's taking place. So of course, the next piece is we have to produce.
So let's just put a punctuation on that. 4 hours, a half day with the VP, all the AVPs underneath. With all does that happen once a quarter? How often are you going to do that for a cohort?
So great question. So I actually, this is one time I did sit back and I was like, okay, what's the strategic approach to this? And honestly, there isn't a strategic approach to this. And here's why, because we needed it about every month in the fall based on how the numbers. And now we've kind of trickled out a little bit. So it's like, I'm not going to take a brand new employee, one person, and be like, here's all the AVPs and the VP and make that person feel a little bit uncomfortable. So we're going to play with the cadence a little bit. We'll probably do it again, I would say late spring, early summer. So like June-ish. And then we'll get it into the flow in the fall again as we go into fiscal year 25 and the numbers that we'll be adding then. I see on average for our size of a shop and where we're heading 3 to 4 times a year. So quarterly is what it would map out to be.
How big is the overall team? Around 100?
So right now we're hovering right around 62 or 63, but we have plans to get back to where they once were pre-pandemic, like 2012, 2013, 2014. It was 110 at one point at RPI.
I thought it was around 100 people. So you're down.
It was 100, 110. And so I don't want to get over my skis on sharing with numbers, but we're super happy to be at 62. When I started in May, I think it was like 35, 36. So and we've lost about 4 or 5. And then, which happens is you're building and change, Chris, and all those things. And people decide whether they're going to stay or find another opportunity. And so that happens.
Yep. 100%.
So whether it's during the onboarding process or sort of at other points during sort of the employee engagement that you're doing, what advice do you find yourself giving over and over again to individuals when they come to talk with you about their career path or their work that they're doing?
Yeah. So I'll answer it in 2 different perspectives. One from an onboarding perspective, right? So it's a brand new relationship that I'm building with our new employees. What I talk about and what's the most important piece I think that they want to ask, but they might not always be able to ask is directly because they're brand new, what's the leadership style here? Right? I mean, you get a sense of that in your interview, but once you've really started is when you really, really get a taste of the leadership and the culture. And I'm very transparent and honest, obviously having worked with Matt, it's my opinion that he is one of the best in the industry, 35 plus years, right? And he sets the tone for the culture and what we're trying to do. He has high goals and he pushes hard and he pushes fast, which is important. But it's also a very supportive culture. And that comes from his leadership, as well as our President Schmidt. So that's from the onboarding perspective. I find myself talking about that a lot. And then the other side of that is someone who's been in their work and they're just kind of, where am I going? What am I doing? What's next for me? And that conversation is a very honest conversation. And sometimes it's about finding out what can we help that person grow within skill sets? What's that professional development plan for that individual? That doesn't necessarily mean it's a title change or a pay increase, right? It means what's the professional development plan? And other times, and some people don't always love when I say this, but sometimes I'm honest to a fault. You do have to look elsewhere to grow your career. You have to look at other opportunities at times to figure out how that adds to your skill set, how that diversifies your skill set, and what you're learning when you leave a place. Because there is such a growth that takes place through a transition when you're leaving a place of comfort. I was very comfortable at Syracuse, very, very comfortable.
Yep.
In a good, beautiful way.
Yeah, I was the same at Lehigh, and the best thing I did in my career path was pick up and go to Cornell and try it at a bigger, more complex and.
It was very hard leaving SU because I was so comfortable, and I adore the people at Syracuse and years of history there. So,
Chris, what advice do you find yourself giving clients when it comes to getting the right people into the right leadership roles?
I think it boils down to trust and communication. So, when I'm talking to an AVP who's building her or his team right underneath, it's finding the people that they can trust, and starting with that relationship with, overdoing communication, over communicate. And whenever possible, I mean, I know we're in a virtual post-COVID world, and most all shops we're talking to have these hybrid schedules, but I try to get them to, whenever possible, meet in person, look them in the eye so you can see them, feel the body language, and build that trust, and that open communication is critical, I think, when you're leading a team and building that team underneath you. I'm gonna jump back to Sue. So real quick, so the listeners know Matt Tremolin was the VP for advancement at Syracuse.
Yes,
left
he
to go to RPI, and he stole you and brought you over. Is that how we say it, or will Matt be mad at me for saying that?
That's one way we can frame it. I was fortunate enough that Matt and others at Syracuse took a huge chance on me, hiring me in 2016 as the VP of Alumni Engagement there. And so we had a great run for nearly 6.5 years, and then transitioned into employee engagement there at Syracuse and then Matt had an opportunity to go to RPI. And so he left and stole, recruited, whatever, however you want to frame it.
Right.
And I'm remote. And that's another part of my world. So although I'm in Albany about 2 to 3 times a month, and it works. It works because there's trust. So,
and outside guy looking in, observing that Syracuse had gone through several different iterations of alumni leadership, and until you arrived and provided that stability and vision for the place, it was a constant churn there. There was never really any, clear direction the program was going until you. Fast forward to 2016 to the present, you actually turned that program into a really good, one that is looked at, and others, and you were able to recruit a great leader into the role to take over after you moved into Lauren.
Fantastic. Yeah. Chris, thank you for that. And I Matt, President Siverud, so many, our chair when I was hired. The investment at Syracuse allowed us to really build the alumni engagement team there. And I look at that success, and thank you for that compliment. And Lauren is amazing. And that team is rock star level team. They really hit their stride pre-pandemic and then kept it going. But I look at that success and I sit back and I think that's because without even knowing, I care deeply then about employee engagement, right? It becomes natural to me. It's part of my strength set and what I do. And so I look at that as a great example of why we had success, because we focused on one another and we built a great culture within that team. Kim Infanti, shout out to Kim Infanti.
Another superstar there. I had a chance to work with that team with Lauren for a little bit, and have just come to find just one after another rock stars in every spot. It's amazing.
They really, really are.
So leading an alumni shop for those years, and I think of it as like sort of, you herded 300,000 cats in that role. Does any of that learning apply to herding 65 and soon to be 100 maybe cats in your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say that, my portfolio right now is our advancement division. That's the portfolio.
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it. I love that.
I'm an advancement officer. I'm just engaging our own individuals and people. And I love to use that because I think it's true. But also when you step back and you really think about employee engagement per the definition of Gallup and what I mentioned earlier, ongoing dialogue. Well, that's what alumni want, to remain in an engagement path and a community, right? They want to know their purpose. They want to see development. They want caring conversations. Again, there's such a parallel track and so much synergy between the two that I do think in many ways my background in alumni engagement and stewardship really lends itself to how to build the internal relationships to help people become the best version of themselves. And that's my goal. And that's my job. I say that during onboarding. My job is to help you be the best version so you're successful for RPI. Let's talk about how we can do that.
Love it.
And I love it. I love the work that I get to do. I think I'm just a born coach, as a college athlete. It's just it's what I love to do.
Yep. Love it.
You're clearly an expert in your field and passionate about it. I think it's fantastic. We need more Sue Ballards out there across advancement teams. it's fair to say that not a lot of advancement shops are making the investment in your particular role. Would you say is that a fair assessment? Is it changing? How would you sort of assess the field?
I think the pandemic came in and put a huge exclamation mark on all industries as far as people and values and decisions that people are going to make based on their own set of values. Meaning we saw tremendous turnover right after the pandemic, right? Because people were no longer going to set aside and work in an environment or a culture that didn't align with their values, their core values. And so I think post-pandemic, there's been more of an emphasis on this work. And I can tell you, coming out of the talent management conference from Cage was just like, you sit there and you're just blown away by the members of that organization and the work that they're doing. But, Harvard is adding 2 more positions to their already talent managed scope under Brittany's leadership there. 1 specific to employee engagement, 1 specific to diversity, I believe. Don't quote me on that. And so they're certainly growing and expanding. I think it's the smaller shops, which smaller is relative, right? I came from Syracuse, so 180, give or take, pre-pandemic to, 60-ish and where we're going. I think it's sometimes our size shops that don't always have this type of representation within just the advancement division, which again allows me an amazing platform within our industry to talk about the importance of it, no matter the size of shop. And maybe you can't dedicate just a role to it, but how do you take someone who's really passionate and really good at this and add this into their own professional growth as an AVP? And I think it's very important that it is someone who sits at that senior leadership table. It has to come from the top. It has to, in order to be part of the culture.
So sort of as we kind of approach the end of our first half hour, Sue, I thought a good question to end on would be one I think everyone's thinking about, which is, what's the trick for retaining great advancement talent?
Yeah. So I wish we all had the answer to this magic question.
Yes.
If you do have it, don't give it away for free. Wait a little bit.
Yeah. You can charge for this.
And I don't have the perfect answer. Honestly, I think it's making sure a couple things. One, the ongoing dialogue component of employee engagement is really, really important with your manager. And if you're in a relationship with your manager where you feel supported and safe and valued, that person is going to be able to open up and talk about, I've had an opportunity and what does this look like? And how does this compare to my career path here within our current organization, right? And that's the goal of ongoing dialogue, to ensure that it's not a surprise, to ensure that your top talent, it's just like a giving pyramid. We should be looking at our advancement shop as internal top talent. Who's your top 10% and what are we doing for them? What is their internal stewardship plan? What is their internal professional development plan? So we don't lose them. But if someone is speaking to them, how are we going to get ahead of that, right? And sometimes we can't always match with dollars. I mean, cash matters. Green is a good, and people look at that. They look at the cost of living and what their income looks like. And so when someone comes in from another organization who has a fantastic offer, I think that the other organization is going to be ahead of that offer if there's been the ongoing dialogue with the manager, and that individual knows that they have the support and the care and the leadership from their current manager. That matters. And I think that helps with retention. And then overall, it's about the culture. We're very focused on Clifton Strengths at our PI. I just went through the certification for it. And so we're building a culture of strength-based work, which also lends itself to employee engagement. And if you're focused on strengths, the data shows you're going to be more productive and more engaged as well. And so I think those 2 things come hand in hand. Most importantly, it shouldn't be the first time that the manager's having a conversation with top talent when the top talent has an amazing offer. They should have been having the conversations earlier.
Yeah, that's crucial, to not wait till the very end when someone's leaving or about to leave before you're actually having those meaningful conversations about growth and opportunity. Well, we're bumped up against the top of our live show. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We're going to take a short break and be back with Sue Ballard on our podcast edition of Alumless. But before we do, Chris, who are we featuring in a couple weeks?
How appropriate is this? I had forgotten it when I said this answer earlier, but it's Andrew Gosen, our man at Cornell. He's going to be joining us and talking all things digital engagement and digital fundraising. And he's a guru in this space. It's probably, not probably the right word to use, but he is amazing, brilliant guy. And I think our listeners will love hearing from him.
So I thought that was totally planned out, that you were just foreshadowing the next episode from the moment we hit record on this one.
It was accidental, but it's perfect.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, thanks to Max Leiston and the great team at Protopia for being our presenting sponsor. And we're going to take that short break and be back with Sue Ballard on the podcast edition. But for everyone else, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.